طيب. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. We're moving forward with the next narration, inshallah ta'ala, from Kitab al-Tahara, Babul Miyah, the book of purification, the chapter of waters, from Bulug Maram, min Adilat al-Ahkam, attainment of the objectives, this noble work by Al-Hafiz Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala. This fifth narration, as enumerated in this particular work, or in this narration, is mentioned as the fourth. عن عبد الله ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا كان الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث وفي لفظ لم ينجس أخرجه الأربع وصححه ابن خزيمة وابن حبان والحاكم. Narrated Abdullah ibn Umar, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if there is enough water to fill two pots, we're going to come back, inshallah ta'ala, to the amount or the quantity of what is mentioned here in this narration. What is referred to here in the translation as two pots, it carries no impurity. A narration or a narration has, it does not become impure. Al-Arba'a reported it, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, and Al-Hakim graded it Sahih, authentic. This hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, this hadith, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, based off of viewpoint and focus. This narration is the final narration, and this narration is the concluding narration based off of what has been presented from Ibn Hajar up until now concerning and concluding the purification of water itself for water itself, entertaining the discussion of impurities relevant to pure water. However, from the first narration up until this narration, whether you count them as 4 or 5, this narration of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma is going to be the final and concluding narration that details for you the discussion concerning the purity of water for water itself. The remaining narrations and concluding narrations that are going to come are going to entertain the discussion of the purity of water in connection with another person's usage. The purity of water in connection with a dog. The purity of water in relation to a cat. The purity of water regarding something other than water itself, as opposed to the clear discussion of impurities. Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, presents the basis for water. It's tuhur, it's pure. He presents the exception to the purity of water, that which has been changed by taste, color, or smell by impurity that occurs from within the water itself. This final narration of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma is going to entertain the discussion concerning the purity of water and its quantity. At what quantity of water will we entertain its purity can be affected or adjusted? The first narration deals with the purity of water itself for itself. The second narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it deals with the purity of water and there is nothing that can impurify it. The third narration of Abu Umama al-Bahili radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it deals with the purity of water and that nothing can make it impure except if it is changed or altered by an impurity concerning its taste, color, or smell of that which occurs inside of the water. So, based off of how you view or enumerate, you have 3 or 4 narrations or hadith that have been presented up until this junction, entertaining and revolving solely around the purity of water and the exclusion to the purity of water. This narration of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma is going to finalize the discussion concerning water itself outside of any external factors from the avenue of quantity. How much water is considered to be pure if impurities affect it, if impurities mix with it, if impurities encounter that amount of water? This narration of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, Sheikh Fawzan, in his explanation of this narration, he gives us a very brief biography of this particular rawi of the hadith, Abdullah ibn Umar. He says, Huwa Abu Abdurrahman. Huwa Abu Abdurrahman. Abdullah ibn Umar, as known by his name itself, his kunya is Abu Abdurrahman. Abu Abdurrahman. He is Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab. He himself as known as Abdullah ibn Umar, the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. أسلم صغيرا مع أبيه عمر. He accepted Islam and became Muslim with his father Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. وأول مشاهده الخندق. And the first battle that he witnessed or that he was present to partake in was the battle of Al-Khandaq. لأنه كان قبلها صغيرا. And that is because prior to that, the battles that took place, he was young. He was too young to participate in the battles. قال Malik, he says, Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala has said, بقي ابن عمر بعد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم 60 سنة. Imam Malik says that Abdullah ibn Umar, he lived for 60 years after the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. وكان شديد التحري والاحتياط في الفتاوى وكل ما يفعله بنفسه وله عناية بالتتبع آثار النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. He mentions that Abdullah ibn Umar وكان شديد التحري. He was very accelerated Well, we were saying he was very engrossed in his zeal and desire to follow the deen. Well, ihtiyat fi fatawahu. And he was very cautious and careful in his religious verdicts and statements that he presented. وَقُولْ مَا يَفْعَلُهُ بِنَفْسِهِ, and everything that he did pertaining to himself. وَلَهُ عِنَايَةٌ بِتَتَبِعِ آثَارِ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم وَأَمْثَالِهِ. And he had great importance and care upon following the narration and the steps and traces of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and those type of affairs. توفي في مكة سنة 73. He died in Mecca the year of 73 Hijrah. He died in the year 73 Hijrah. Sheikh Fawzan, he continues. He says, وَقَدْ اخْتَلَفَ الْعُلَمَاء فِي هَذَا الْحَدِيثِ. He says that the scholars have differed over this hadith. فَصَحَّحَهُ قَوْمٌ وَهُوَ الصَّوَابُ وَضَعَّفَهُ آخَرُونَ. He begins by telling you that the scholars have differed over the authenticity of this particular narration. فَصَحَّحَهُ قَوْمٌ وَهُوَ الصَّوَابُ. He says that some scholars have authenticated this narration. وَهُوَ الصَّوَابُ. And this is what is correct. With Sheikh Fawzan, he holds the narration that we're going to refer to as قُلَّتَيْن. قُلَّتَيْن is the wording that is used inside of this narration. It is from the actual wording of the narration. So I'm going to write it for you in Arabic and in English. This is the form, the tathniya, the dual form, if you would say, in English. قلتين قلتين. And it's referring to these two pots as mentioned in the translation. So this narration is commonly and famously referred to by the people of knowledge as the hadith قلتين, hadithu قلتين, the hadith of the two pots. Sheikh Fawzan, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he mentions that the scholars, they differ over the authentication of this particular narration. He says there are some scholars that have authenticated the narration, and Sheikh Fawzan mentions وَهُوَ الصَّوَابُ. So we know that with Sheikh Fawzan, he holds this hadith to be authentic. وَضَعَّفَهُ آخَرُونَ. And he mentions that some of the scholars have held this narration to be da'if. وممن صححه الشافعي وأحمد والطحاوي والدارقطني وابن دقيق العيد وممن صححه كما ذكره الحافظ ابن خزيمة وابن حبان والحاكم. He says from amongst the scholars that have authenticated this narration, Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad, al-Tahawi, al-Daraqutni, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, and from those that have authenticated the narration as mentioned by Al-Hafidh, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, wal-Hakim. وممن ضعفه Ibn Abdul Barr wa Ibn al-Arabi. And from amongst those individuals that he mentions that have held this narration to be da'if, Ibn Abdul Barr and Ibn al-Arabi. Sheikh Abdullah al-Bassam, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his explanation of Bulug al-Maram concerning the takhrij, the extraction of this particular narration, and the discussion concerning its authenticity. He says, وقال الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية رحمه الله تعالى أكثر أهل العلم بالحديث على أنه حديث حسن يحتج به. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions the majority of the people of knowledge of hadith. The majority of the people of knowledge of hadith. They hold that this hadith is a hadith that is hasan. It is a hadith that is hasan. Yuhtajja bih. It can be utilized for proof, evidence, and argumentation. Sheikh Abdullah al-Bassam, he also mentions وَمِمَّنْ صَحَّحَ هَذَا الْحَدِيث, and from amongst those individuals that have held this narration to be authentic, Ibn Khuzaymah, وابن حبان, وابن منذر, وابن منده, والطحاوي, والحاكم, والبيحقي, والخطابي, والنووي, والذهبي, وابن حجر, والسيوطي, وأحمد شاكر, وغيرهم. Sheikh Abdullah al-Bassam, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions from amongst those scholars that do hold this narration to be authentic, it is Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Habban, Ibn Mundah, Al-Tahawi, Al-Hakim, Al-Bayhaqi, Al-Khattabi, Imam Al-Nawawi, Al-Dhahabi, Ibn Hajar, Al-Suyuti, Ahmed Shakir, and other than them as well. This hadith, if you look at its understanding and meaning, if there is enough water to fill 2 pots, it carries no impurity. And in a particular narration, it does not become impure. Within this particular work, within the footnotes, they mention here the second note, khulla, is a large earthen pot which may contain water up to 2.5 water skins, meaning 113 kilograms. If you look up, for the most part, as I was looking up myself here, there was other reference points for al-qullataini, 113 kilograms, they mention equals 29 gallons and somewhat more, about 29 gallons. How much that's going to look to us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. What it's going to typically fill in our understanding or estimation, whether that's the typical size of a bathtub, or it's 2, or it's 3. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I don't know how much a typical bathtub would hold, but that which would hold approximately 29 gallons and some in addition. Approximately. The concern concerning this tahdeed, this measurement, is somewhat troublesome by narration with the people of knowledge. As you have seen, the discussion over this particular narration, it starts with its authenticity. Is the narration authentic or not? There is great difference amongst the scholars concerning this narration and its authenticity from 2 major avenues. An avenue concerning its isnad, the chain, the actual men inside of the narrators, and the matan, the actual text of the hadith itself. The understanding of the difference with the people of knowledge concerning where the trouble lies, it revolves around a topic and a term called mudtarib. I'll write it for you. Mudtarib. And I'll tell you what it means, inshallah. You might refer to it as clashing and conflicting. مضطرب, اضطراب. There is impact, there is clashing, there is conflicting that is going on inside of the narration. And what is important to understand about مضطرب, we put it here. I think I wrote this correct. It's unresolvable. There's no way to find resolve or resolution. There's no exit. It's just continuous clash and confliction. So let's say you have a situation between two conflicting parties, and there's no means of resolution between the two parties. There's just constant clash. There's constant conflict. And they say, okay, what if we try counseling? Counseling doesn't work. And they say, okay, what if we try family members to try to bring some type of resolution, resolvement? It doesn't work. We say, time heals all. Let's give it some time. They realize time does not heal all. It doesn't work. For whatever that problem is, there's just ittirab. There's just constant clash, conflict, differing with no ends of resolve. So this is not resolve that has a means of exit from the conflict. When it's muttarib, it is a category from the categories of a weak hadith. When we talk about the hadith that is mawdu', it's fabricated. It is the category from the categories of a weak hadith. When we talk about hadith, there are various other topics, if you would say, concerning weak hadith, reasons of why hadith are weak. Muttarib is a term and a titling that belongs to the classification of weak hadith. You do not use this with hadith that are sahih or hasan. This is the discussion that entertains why a hadith is weak. The hadithul qullataini, this particular hadith, the reasoning behind its weakness lies in the hadith being muttarib. There's clash, there's conflict, there's something that is not resolvable. So the individual asks, where is the conflict? Because with the science of hadith, it's either going to come from the isnad, the chain of men, or from the actual text. What is the actual narration saying? With this particular hadith, it contains both avenues. There's ittirab in the isnad, there's conflict concerning the men in the chain that seems to be unresolvable. That's a clear red flag for a hadith that is da'if. Then there is that which is muttarib, continuous clash and conflict in terms of the actual text, referring to the actual chain, the men of the narration. When you look at the chains of the narrations, as mentioned by the people of hadith, they say that when the chain is presented, it says that it goes through a particular chain of narrators. But then when it's mentioned in other works, it goes through different narrators, the same narration. So it seems that there's no resolve to pinpoint which narration is the correct narration. In this narration, it went through A, B, C, D, E, F. 5 narrators, no specific names. In the other narrations, it's going through A, B, now it's not C, it's F, then E and D. So you say, wait a minute, it switched. Then you go to the other narrations. You say, well, we'll find this narration in another work that has a clear chain. Switches. It mentions that this narrator, when it gets to C, instead of him mentioning he got it from D, he says he got it from F. And then in another narration, the narrator of A, B, when he gets to C, he switches. And in this narration, we'll say he got it from G. We say this is troublesome. There's no consistency here. When we go to another narration, A upon B upon C, who got it from G? Who did he actually get the narration from? So they say now there's conflict that's not resolvable. With those scholars that say that the hadith is da'if, it's weak. There are some scholars that follow up behind it, as we mentioned, those that hold the narration to be authentic, and they address those particular concerns. And they show you there is a sound chain, and the hadith is authentic because of such. Now the clash concerning the actual text. There are certain wordings of this particular hadith, as in this one here mentions qullataini, 2 pots. There are certain wordings of this narration that just mention 1. There are certain wordings of this narration that mention 3. There are certain wordings of this narration that mention 40. 40. This is what the scholars do when they look at it and they say there's ittirab, there's too much clash. These are clearly distinct quantities one from another. It can't apply to all of them. And because going through the remedy and the methodology of the science of hadith, they cannot find a remedy for it and a resolution, they say it lies as being muttarib. This hadith is in constant clash. Any hadith in constant clash that doesn't find resolve, it stays as weak. And this is why with those scholars that say that this narration is weak, they will not utilize it. They say it is because of the clash. There's no resolve. They say we know there's difference, but there's no exit from the difference. Then there are some scholars that say, yes, we know that there is clash, but we have found a way to exit, whether you're dealing with the chain or whether you're dealing with the actual text. When it comes to the text, some of them, they will say, Qullataini is the authentic narration. 2 other narrations are shadh. They're conflicting with that which is most authentic, and the other one is fabricated. It's a lie. So with some of the scholars, they found exit from this clash. They were able to utilize this narration as being authentic. With other scholars, they say no. The clash is unresolvable. And anything that is unresolvable, that has a clear illah, that's qadihah, This now is severe, and this is something that is, if you would say, weighty and significant in terms of the error to go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 40. Which one? Because we're dealing with an amount of water that refers back to now, if it reaches this level, it cannot contain impurity. Impurity can enter, it can mix, it can encounter it. But this water is such in an abundant amount, the impurities have no effect on it. If it's that 40 in that narration. But 40 is clearly different and distinct from 1. 1 is distinct from 2. And 2 is distinct from 3. 3 is distinct from 1, وهكذا, and likewise. So because of this, those scholars that will not recognize this hadith as a proof and evidence, they will say it's because there's too much conflict. One avenue is sufficient. If it was just from the side of the isnad and there's no resolve, that itself is enough to declare the narration to be da'if. It's weak. We can't utilize it as a proof in the argumentation. If it was from the other side, from the textual side, 1, 2, 3, or 40, and it had nothing to deal with the isnad, the chain, it itself would be sufficient to say the hadith is weak. It's not suitable or sufficient to be utilized for proof, argument, and evidence. However, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, he gives us a measuring stick, if you would say, something that we always try to look for concerning these masail, these particular topics. Where are the majority of the people of hadith? Because we're dealing with now the issue of authenticity. We're dealing with the issue that is specific to the scholars of hadith. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, as mentioned by Shaykh Abdullah al-Bassam, he mentions أكثر أهل العلم بالحديث. The majority of the scholars of hadith, they hold that this hadith is a hadith that is hasan. يحتج به. You utilize it for argumentation, evidence, and proof. So this is something that if you're not sure and you say, do I utilize this narration moving forward or not? There's great difference amongst the people of knowledge concerning whether this hadith is authentic or not. And it's concerning a very important topic and subject matter. The purity of the water that you're going to utilize for your prayer, that you're going to utilize to remove the impurities. Basic issues, but crucial to your everyday life as a Muslim. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions that the majority of the people in knowledge of hadith, they will hold this hadith to be authentic. What that means for you and I, for the most part, is that the positions that we will get on average, day in and day out, will be based on entertaining this narration as a proof. And they will be utilizing this particular narration, hadithul qullatayn, not 1, not 3, not 40, but 2. These 2 large pots, which come about to equalize, for the most part, 29 gallons, based off of the measurement that's being presented here. Now, even with that, there's an asterisk attached to it. Not necessarily from the translator's work, but from the teacher's standpoint that's being presented. From the people of knowledge, there are those that say there is nothing conclusive concerning or containing the amount of a qullah. Qullatayni means 2 pots. Qullatani, we could say. Masjid, masjidani. Kitab, kitabani. In the way it's being utilized linguistically, in the text, it's taking a different form, but it has the same meanings. Qullatani, qullatayni. It's the same thing. It's 2. 2 what? Qulla. This particular measurement whether it's 2 or 1, it's still something that you would just double or break down in half. But what would 1 be in order to double it? That specific measurement with the people of knowledge, with some of them, they say this is unknown to us, which feeds back into their understanding of the narration is not authentic. With those that hold that that narration is authentic, they go more mainstream with there is a particular measurement for us. And even with those that hold the narration to be authentic, there still may be some varying and some differing over its specific amount, what actually is a qullah. However, they will say that the narration is authentic and it is a proof and it is an evidence. But the specific amount isn't something that's agreed upon with those that hold it to be authentic. But we're just going to go along with, if you would say, what is presented in the material here. Understanding there is room for error. There is room for argumentation or differing. But here, if we go with what is presented, which equals, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, with just a quick Googling of it, I have my own measurements. Here, 29 or so gallons of water. By this narration, if the water reaches this amount, it does not hold or contain any type of impurities. طيب. Sheikh Fawzan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, with extracting some of the points of benefit, what is understood from this hadith of Qullataini? Again, remembering this narration is simple, it's brief, and it's concise. In a nutshell, its meaning, if water reaches this, I'm going to just use the quote unquote. So don't hold any particular enumeration or amount in your head or measurement. Just take the general meaning. If water reaches 2 pots, it can't be contaminated. And in another wording of the narration, it tells you what that contamination is. Lam yanjus. It does not become impure, meaning najis. And remember, we don't want to hold the understanding that impurity, as mentioned or in the translation, refers to something that a person looks at as not being pure from their own eyes, meaning some type of dirt or something else that is pure from the earth, but it is looked at from their eye as something that is despicable or is dirty. Something that might be dirty or despicable does not necessitate that it's najis, that is impure. So this may be something from the roundabout understanding and meaning that people have grown and developed or acquired over time that XYZ is impure. XYZ is impure. However, it's not religiously impure. And they may take that roundabout understanding and start throwing its application to these particular narrations. So Sheikh Fawzan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, what he's going to give you now, this is going to be something that is going to give you a little bit more understanding, if you would say, of usulul fiqh. We're not going to go heavy into usulul fiqh. We're not going to deviate from the topic or the subject matter, but it's going to give you an understanding in terms of how texts are viewed. So Sheikh Fawzan, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he says, Al-Wajh al-Rabi', the fourth view or point of what we see from this particular narration, الحديث بمنطوقه دليل على أن الماء الكثير وهو ما بلغ قلتين فأكثر إذا وقعت فيه نجاسة فإنه لا ينجس سواء أتغير أو لم يتغير. This is a very important view and understanding of this particular narration, because the difference that's going to continue to come from this particular narration is going to be based off of this understanding. The difference now is not dealing with the authenticity of the narration. We've bypassed that. That discussion, if you would say, from this point moving forward, for right now, that discussion is over. The discussion now is concerning what is the actual understanding of the text itself. What is Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma saying that the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam said concerning the water in this narration? إِذَا بَلَغَ قُلَّتَيْنِ لَمْ يَحْمِلَ الْخَبَثِ. That if water reaches the amount of 2 pots, it does not hold or contain khabath. And in another wording of the narration, lam yanjus, it does not become najis. Sheikh Fawzan mentions al-hadithu bi-mantuqi, this particular narration by that which is spoken. This is very important. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to write this for you. And this is something that you can put this in your general notes, and you could also mirror this and mimic it in your notes from the category of usul al-fiqh, just in general, because this is something that is of great importance. So he's mentioning al-hadith bi-mantuqi. And this is what we're going to refer to as that which is spoken, nataqa. وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. The Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, he does not speak of his own accord. يَنْطِقُ, mantuq. These are the root words. Na, nun, ta, qaf. It's in the maf'ul form. It's spoken. This narration is telling you by text. إِذَا بَلَغَ الْمَاء قُلَّتَيْنِ لَمْ يَحْمِلَ الْخَبَثِ. That if water reaches 2 qulla, 2 of these pots, it does not hold or contain any impurity. Where do you get that understanding from? Do we have to look into some type of external view, external examination to get that understanding? The narration speaks it. The narration says it itself. It's in the text. This is very important, this understanding of how you're going to see the understanding. Where do you get that understanding from? Does it come from another narration? No, it comes from this narration. It says it itself. Is this something that you have to examine and that you have to scan through the narration to get that out of the narration? We say, no, it's clear, it's surface value. The text tells you that itself. So Sheikh Fawzan, hafidhahullah ta'ala, he says, al-hadithu bi-mantuqi dalilun ala anna al-ma' al-kathir. This narration is a proof and an evidence that water in abundance, وهو ما بلغ قلتين فأكثر. What is an abundance of water? By this particular hadith and narration, your bottom line measurement for what is an abundance of water is قلتين. Do you get that from another narration? No, it comes directly from the narration, what is spoken from it. So the Sheikh, he's mentioning this hadith it tells you, and I want you to remember this affair of that which is mantuq, because this is going to carry over from this hadith into following a hadith. Other narrations that are going to come, this is also utilized with ayat, verses from the Quran, because it lies and it rests in usulul fiqh. It's surfacing here in hadith from this hadith of qullataini, but this is something that is going to be applied elsewhere. So I just want you to have a mental note of it, even if it's just very scarce and brief notes concerning it. I want you to understand that it exists and it has an implication behind it. So Sheikh Fawzan, he says that this hadith, by that which is spoken by it, it tells us that water in abundance, وهو ما بلغ قلتين فأكثر, and it is water that reaches قلتين or أكثر. It is this or more than that in amount. إذا وقعت فيه النجاسة, that if water enters, that if impurity enters into that water, فإنه لا ينجس, it does not become impure. سواء التغير أو لم يتغير, regardless if the water changes or not. This is important now because he's telling us even if the water changes, it's not impure. Hmm? Because of the amount. Remember where we began in formatting and giving a preface to this particular class, for this particular hadith. We mentioned that we've only covered up until this junction 4 or 5 hadith, depending on how you enumerate them. Here in this work, this is enumerated as the 4th hadith. So the previous hadith that were mentioned, the hadith of Abu Umama, the 2 narrations are viewed as one. That's why I mentioned to you, there's really not a discussion. It's really not a big issue if you look at it and you say it's 2 hadith or it's 1. It's not something that is a technical discussion at this junction. It can be a discussion, but at this junction, it's not a technical discussion that needs to be entertained. So you will find some people, they may have, this is actually the 5th hadith. If you say go to the 5th hadith, and they go to the hadith of Abu Hurairah after this. And we say, no, we're dealing with the other hadith. The technical breakdown of how we got here is not the discussion. The issue of what I'm highlighting or referencing is that there has only been 3 or 4 hadith that have been previously presented concerning the purity of water. This narration itself is going to be the full circle, the conclusion of the discussion of the purity of water for water itself. If you can understand that, if I'm saying it clear or correctly. The first narration dealt with the purity of water. The second narration dealt with the purity of water and nothing can impurify it. The third and fourth narration dealt with the purity of water. Nothing can impurify it except impurities that change its taste, color, or smell from that which occurs inside of the water. They are all dealing with the affair of water itself by itself. The only thing that has been entertained up until the tail end of that discussion was the actual impurities that change taste, color, or smell. Not which impurities, but impurities that change the taste, color, and smell occurring inside of the water. They remove it from that discussion. That's the only thing that has been presented up until this point. This narration is the conclusion of the narrations that are presented in this bab, the chapter of waters, that revolve around the discussion of the purity of water itself for itself. So we're still just dealing with the affair of the purity of water. We're just now dealing with a quantification, a measurement of water. If it reaches this particular amount, everything that has been presented, it stays as such, and it cannot become impure. That's what we've taken from the narration, from the previous narrations and the narration thus far. Sheikh Fawzan is telling you from that which is spoken from the narration, surface value, it tells you itself. If water reaches this amount or greater, it cannot be made impure. That which is spoken by the narration. Whether the water changes or not, he says it's still the same. What I want you to do as we're moving forward, understanding what has been previously presented, understand that at this junction, there is a conflict. The resolve is going to come, but understanding the steps, even though the work is being presented and there hasn't been much detail behind it yet, there is conflict. Because Sheikh Fawzan is saying that the narration is telling us, by that which is spoken from it, that if water reaches this amount or greater, it does not become impure, whether it changes or it doesn't change. So we said whether it changes, and we said, well, wait a minute. The narration before mentioned water stays pure unless it's made impure by an impurity that changes its taste, color, and smell, and by consensus of the ummah. That is its ruling. Up until this point, Sheikh Fawzan is giving you something that's conflicting with it. Now, this isn't the conclusion, but in your head, there should be a red flag and say, wait a minute, by consensus of the scholars, this is conflicting. How are we going to exit from this? The Sheikh is going to conclude. He's going to clarify for us, inshallah. He says, وَهَذَا الْمَنْطُوقِ بِهَذَا الْعُمُومِ لَا يَصِحُ. And this is the conclusion, this is the clarity. The Sheikh, he mentions, وَهَذَا الْمَنْطُوقِ, this which is spoken from this narration, بِهَذَا الْعُمُومِ, by this generality, لَا يَصِحُ. This is not sound, it's not correct. لما تقدم من نقل الإجماع على أن الماء إذا غيرته النجاسة نجس مطلقا سواء أكان قليلا أم كثيرا. This is important now, because now he's going to start to detail and outline for you where the conflict is, why this is not correct. He says, this is because of what has been previously presented and mentioned of that which is transmitted from the consensus of the scholars, that water, if it is changed by an impurity, it becomes impure in general, regardless if it is an abundance of water or not. وَدَلَّ الْحَدِيث بِمَفْهُومِهِ. Now this is the counterpart. This is further clarification. وَدَلَّ الْحَدِيث بِمَفْهُومِهِ. And this hadith indicates to us by that which is understood. So we have now that which is mantuq, and he's presenting something to us. The mafhum. Fa-ha-ma. Fahima. Fahm. An understanding. So from one aspect of how we see this narration, it's mantuq. The narration speaks to us and it tells us something in general. From another aspect of this narration, there is a mafhum. There is something that it's not spoken, is something that's understood. It's taken from the narration by an understanding inside of the narration. The narration does not explicitly tell you that. So the Sheikh, he says here, وَدَلَ الْحَدِيث بِمَفْهُومِهِ عَلَى أَنَّ الْقَلِيلِ وَهُوَ مَا دُونَ قُلَّتَيْنِ, that which is a minute amount of water, it is that which is lesser than قُلَّتَيْنِ. So I'm going to do this. So we have قُلَّتَيْنِ. I'm going to write it next to the English here. If it equals this, it does not become impure. And impure means najis. If it's equal to قلتين or akthar. If it's lesser than قلتين, it carries impurity. So the Shaykh, he mentions here, وَدَلَّ الْحَدِيث بِمَفْهُومِهِ. This hadith gives you the understanding. It indicates and it provides you with an understanding. عَلَى أَنَّ الْقَلِيلِ. This is what is qalil. وَهُوَ مَا دُونَ قُلَّتَيْنِ. Anything lesser than قُلَّتَيْنِ. ينجس, it becomes impure. بمجرد ملاقات النجاسة, just by merely encountering, mixing, or touching. So by that which is mantuq from the narration, if anything impure encounters, mixes, or touches water that is of the amount of qullataini or greater, it doesn't become impure, whether it changes or not. By that which is mafhum, what you're going to now understand from the narration, that water that is lesser than qullataini, if it mixes or encounters impurities, it carries impurities just by mere encounter, touch, or mixing. سواء تغير أو لم يتغير, regardless if it changes or if it doesn't change. This is important now, because when we went with qullataini or greater, if the water changed, the Sheikh, he said, it's still pure. Here he's saying if it's lesser than qullataini, even if there's no change, it's impure. This is another red flag that should go off based off of the ijma of the scholars. وهذا الحكم هو مخالف لحكم المنطوق. And he mentions that this understanding, it opposes the ruling of that which you get from that which is spoken. لكنه لا يؤخذ على عمومه. However, you will not take this narration with its generality. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to try to give you a little bit more understanding, emphasis on what is going on here with that which is spoken and that which is understood. We have the hadith, the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqqihhu fid din." That, and he's smiling. I think he knows where we're going. Whoever Allah intends good for, He gives him an understanding of the religion. That's taken from the mantuq. Do you get that? From another hadith? No. Do you have to get that by examining and breaking apart the narration itself? No. It's spoken in the narration, it's surface value. They refer to that as the mantuq. The narration told you this itself, not from another narration, not from detailed examination. Surface value, the narration tells you if Allah wants good for you, He's going to give you an understanding of Islam. That's the mantuq. In terms of mafhum, mafhum can go two different directions. There is that which is referred to as mafhumul mukhalafa and mafhumul muwafaqa. The understanding of that which agrees with something and the understanding of something that opposes something. So now I'm going to give you the mantuq. I'm going to give you a statement, surface value, and I want you to give me the mafhumul mukhalafa, the understanding of its opposite. Sah? طيب? I'm going to go with this very first narration that we mentioned. Sheikh Yahya, he smiled and he laughed, so I assume he's on track with it. We're going to start with you, Sheikh. Okay, Tayyib. In this narration, the Messenger of Allah والسلام, says that Man yuridullahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fi din, that whoever Allah intends and desires good for him, He's going to give him a fiqh of the deen, an understanding of the deen, an awareness of the deen. And this is not just he knows, he has an awareness or an understanding, because that is blameworthy without implementation. So that understanding is the foundation for knowledge that spurs or incites action. To just have knowledge and not act is blameworthy. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا. The likeness of those that we gave the Torah to hold and to implement, وَلَمْ يَحْمِلُوهَا ثُمَّ لَمْ يَحْمِلُوهَا, then they did not carry it out. They did not implement it and uphold its jurisdictions. كَمَثَلُ الْحِمَارِ, they are like the example of a donkey. يَحْمِلُ أَسْفَارًا, they're just carrying a burden and a load. So the affair of just having knowledge, it itself is virtuous, but if it's not followed by action, it's blameworthy. So when you look at that hadith and you say, Man yuridillahu bihi khayran, whoever Allah intends good for, He will give him understanding of the deen. Don't just stop with that mere understanding. That has to be correlated with the affair of action, righteous deeds and actions that follow behind it. Because just having knowledge and not implementing that knowledge is blameworthy. But from the mantuq, from that which is spoken from the narration, if Allah wants good for you, He's going to give you an understanding of the deen. What is the understanding of its opposite? It's not coming in the narration, meaning that there's no wording that's going to say what is this understanding. It's drawn from what I just said or spoke. But it's the understanding of its opposite. So if I tell you, the Messenger ﷺ said, if Allah wants good for you, He's going to give you an understanding of the deen. What is the understanding of its opposite? No.
Is the hadith quoted? I would say that its opposite would be if Allah does not want good for you, then He does not give you the fiqh or the understanding of religion.
أحسن هذا هو خلاص 100% 100%. That is the understanding. It's not spoken, but it's the understanding of the opposite. What is spoken is that if He wants good for you, you get an understanding. What is the understanding of that narration from an opposite perspective? If Allah doesn't want good for you, He's not going to give you an understanding of the deen. You don't get an understanding of the deen, you're not going to get amal. You're not going to get deeds and actions followed behind it that are righteous. So this is an indication for a servant that is ignorant, that he's hindered from acting and drawing near to Allah. And a servant that has an understanding or an awareness, but he's not drawing near and close to Allah with that knowledge. But the mafhum al-mukhalafa, as you've mentioned, this is exactly it, 100%. If we take that process, that mental process and focus, and you use it with this narration, hadithul qullataini, that if water, either balagh al-ma qullataini, if it reaches this amount, or akthar, or more than this, or greater than this, it does not hold impurities. What is the mafhum al-mukhalafa? What is the understanding of the opposite? That which is spoken, if you reach this or greater, you can't be made impure. What is the opposite understanding? Mia be mia, 100%, this is it. If it's lesser than qullataini, it can be made impure. Where did you get that from? The mafhum al-mukhalafa. It's not mentioning specifically now what comes after this now, because this is a detailed discussion from usul al-fiqh. He just give you the generality. It comes from the door of mafhum. You got it from an understanding, not from the text. This is entailed inside of this hadith. And this is dealing with quantity. So what is the great discussion behind this? The great discussion behind this is that what we've previously taken, the purity of water, not being made impure, except by impurity that changes its taste, color, or smell that happens inside of it. And if it does, by ijma of the scholars, it's impure. This narration is contradicting it. Ala umumi, upon its generality. So the way that the scholars, they reason behind this hadith and the previous narrations that have already preceded, this is what they do. I'm gonna erase. I'm gonna erase this. This is from the previous class. So now I'm just gonna give you a basic diagram, if you would say. And this is the mark. I'm gonna put qullataini. Not gonna write qullatani. We don't want to deviate too far. There's no need linguistically. This is the measurement. What did we say it was? Like 29 gallons, right? So that's the amount. This is water, right? طيب. In general, this amount and anything greater does not become impure. But we understand that there is generality in this narration. This is general. This generality now, it has to be made specified and restricted. What hadith has already preceded that is going to specify that generality? That's the hadith of Abu Umama al-Bahili. Whether you look at it to be the third or the fourth, the hadith of Abu Umama will restrict that generality, because this statement here, the general statement of the Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, giving you a specific amount. But we understand that generality of what he's talking about is going to now be restricted by the hadith of Abu Umama. However, the hadith of Abu Umama, now the pushback comes. These are the tools and the steps that we've already discussed. They're going to resurface now. The hadith of Abu Umama is weak. Both narrations. The narration of Ibn Majah, declared da'if by Abu Hatim, and the narration of Al-Bayhaqi. So if the person says, you can't restrict this hadith with a weak hadith, we're saying that I hold this hadith is authentic. You cannot come behind it and restrict it, do anything with it with the hadith that is da'if. The hadith of Abu Umama, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, mentioned that is da'if. The narration of Ibn Majah or Al-Bayhaqi, they're both da'if. What will you utilize to restrict that generality? What did we say really was the proof behind it? No. We're looking for a guiding point that's going to rule and judge. Those are the details inside of the narration that give us an understanding on the alteration or the shift or adjustment of the water. You can't rule or subject an authentic text, whether it's hadith or a verse. You can't rule or adjust an authentic text except with something that is ruling itself. But in this discussion, it does not have to be text. It's the ijma. As we mentioned, the narration of Abu Umama is weak, but the scholars, they are in consensus upon utilizing its text and its subject matter. So you are now going to you're going to specify this generality with the ijma of the scholars. As Sheikh Fawzan, he mentioned, the narration is telling you, even if the water, it changes, by this narration, it tells you that it's not impure. And we would say, no. The ijma, I'll go this way. The ijma comes into this narration and it specifies and it rules over it. Because it tells us specifically if water goes through this process, it's najis. There's no walking it back. At this discussion, there's no walking it back. It's impure. We don't care if it's qullataini, we don't care if it's 3, we don't care if it's 4. If all of it has changed by taste, color, or smell, by impurity, it's najis. The mafhum of this narration, in general, it tells you that if impurity mixes, encounters, or touches that water, it's impure. Because it's telling you if it reaches this amount, it's good. Anything lesser than that, it's not good. Regardless if it doesn't change by taste, color, or smell. And we say, wait a minute, that opposes what? Hmm? We also have the basis of the ijma. But there's something more weightier than that. We want something that's going to govern and guide. We're going to govern and guide by Quran, by Sunnah, by ijma, or by authentic sound qiyas. But ijma and authentic sound qiyas are not text. Is there something that I can rule by? I want to rule by text. I want to judge by text. I want to alter and shift by text. Is there anything of text that has already preceded that says that I can now rule upon this generality from a text by another text? Because that's general. But I have something specific by text that tells me concerning water. That's not the case. The hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. إن الماء طهور لا ينجسه شيء. Exactly. It's a hadith, it's a text. It's an actual text of the Messenger, والسلام, and it tells us specifically, إن الماء طهور. That is the basis. لا ينجسه شيء. This understanding or this generality is coming from an understanding. It's that which is mafhum. The hadith of Abu Sa'id is mantuq. So now I want to give you a qaida on how to judge and utilize, how to manage these two approaches, that which is mantuq and that which is mafhum. I'm going to give you a qaida or a basis of how to manage these two. Sheikh Fawzan, hafidhahullah ta'ala, he says, فَيُقَدِّمَ الْمَنْطُوقِ عَلَى هَذَا الْمَفْهُومِ. You give precedence, weight, and consideration to that which is mantuq over that which is mafhum. You give precedence of that which is mantuq over that which is mafhum. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَالْعُلَمَاء يَقُولُونَ, the scholars, they say, and this is a point of benefit for you as well, this is from the generalities of these notes, and for that which is usul al-fiqh as well. So you can take this and later on you can duplicate this and mirror this in your notes from usul al-fiqh. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَالْعُلَمَاء يَقُولُونَ, and the scholars, they say, إِذَا تَعَارَضَتْ الدَّلَالَتَانِ الْمَنْطُقِيَّةِ وَالْمَفْهُومِيَّةِ فَإِنَّهُ يُقَدَّمْ الْمَنْطُوقِ. Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, إِذَا تَعَارَضَتْ, if there is a conflict or a clash from that which is dalalatani, two pieces of evidence, two pieces of proof, al-mantuqiyya, one of them is based in that which is mantuq. Here he's just saying mantuqiyya to give affiliation. Wal mafhumiyya, and the other one is mafhum, فإنه يقدم المنطوق. Go with that which is spoken. The understanding that you get from qullataini, that anything that is lesser becomes impure, is mafhum. The hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri is mantuq. It now takes precedence over this generality, and we say no. Anything lesser that is of qullataini, if an impurity does intermingle, mix, or encounter that water, and it does not change, it stays with the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. إِنَّ الْمَاءَ الطُّهُورِ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٍ. Water is pure, it does not become impure. A little bit more clarity and clarification concerning this point from Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, and for sake of recording for those that might be able to go back. He says, Al-hadithu lahu mafhum. This hadith, the hadith of Qullataini, it has a mafhum. وهو, and that understanding it is. إذا لم يبلغ قلتين صار نجسا. If it doesn't reach this amount of قلتين, if impurities have touched it, صار نجسا, it becomes impure. That's just the mafhum of the narration, that if the water has not reached this particular amount and impurity has encountered it, it becomes impure. وظاهر هذا المفهوم, and that which is apparent from this understanding, أنه سواء تغير أو لم يتغير, whether it changes or not is not a consideration from this narration of قلتين. The narration is not telling you whether it changes or it doesn't change. It doesn't say that. What you're going to get from the understanding of the narration is that as long as it went in, I got a ruling. Impurity went in, najis. Why? It's lesser than qulataini. There's no breakdown, there's no detail, it's just mafhum. The Shaykh he continues and he says, وَحِينَئِذٍ يَكُونْ مُخَالِفًا لِحَدِيثِ أَبِي أُمَامَ السَّابِقَةِ. He says, and this is clearly opposing the hadith of Abu Umama that has preceded. الدل على أنه لا ينجس الماء إلا بالتغير. That water does not become impure except with change. That is clearly in opposition to the hadith of Abu Umama that water does not become impure except with change. ودلالة الحديث أبو أمامة على أن الماء لا ينجس إلا بالتغير دلالة منطوق. And the hadith of Abu Umama that has preceded, that water does not become impure except by change, is dalalatul mantuq. It is from a proof or evidence based of being mantuq. The narration clearly tells you that. That's not something that you have to derive an understanding for. You don't have to examine the narration. You don't get that from another narration in addition to it. The hadith of Abu Umama clearly tells you, إن الماء لا ينجسه شيء إلا ما غلب على ريحه وطعمه ولونه. The other narration of Al-Bayhaqi, الماء طهور. الماء الطهور إلا إن تغير ريحه أو لونه أو طعمه بنجاسة تحدث فيه. Water is pure, nothing makes it impure except if it is changed by an impurity that changes its taste, color, or smell occurring therein. That's mantuq. The narration of Qullataini gives you an understanding that whatever doesn't reach this amount, it carries impurities, regardless of the change. Regardless of the change. So now when we have that which is mantuq and we have that which is mafhum, we do not rule with that which is mafhum over mantuq. We always go with that which is mantuq over that which is mafhum. I'm going to give you another understanding, another example of the understanding of that which is mantuq and that which is mafhum of muwafaqa. Tayyib? You have a question? Tayyib.
You say go with the spoken over the rather than the understanding.
Mantuq,
Mantuk over
mafhum. Exactly.
is that because the spoken
I'm going to give you now. Where is this? I'm going to give you. That's a beautiful question, Sheikh. I'm going to give you something from Sheikh Fawzan, inshallah ta'ala. Clarifying what you were questioning. Why take mantuq over mafhum? Sheikh Fawzan, he says, لأن المفهومات, you hear now, that which is mafhum, he's just saying mafhumat, it's the plural, but in general, because that which is mafhum, لا تعارض المنطوقات الصريحة, it will not contradict that which is clearly spoken from the narration. لأن المفهوم محتمل, that which is mafhum, it has possibilities inside of it. والمنطوق الصريح لا يحتمل, that which is clearly spoken, it has no possibilities inside of it. If we say إن الماء إذا بلغ القلتين لم يحمل الخبث, that water, if it reaches قلتين, it does not contain impurities. What other possibilities we have with that? There is none. The understanding that you get from a mafhum, if it doesn't reach this, what could happen? It could be impure, or what else? It may not. It has possibilities in here that you don't have here. And this is why, even with the science of hadith, if I have two narrations, and they are saying the same thing, they're both authentic, they're both saying the same thing. My first narration goes through 1, 2, and 3 narrators. It's referred to as thulathi. The isnad only contains 3 narrators. My second hadith is khumasi. Sounds like 5. It's going through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Same thing. First hadith has 3 narrators, authentic, thulathi. Second narration has 5 narrators, khumasi. Which one has more precedence? They're both authentic. Which one has more virtue? The one with 5. Why? There you go. Your light is always bright, Sheikh. Tell me why. Tell me why. Why now the 3 and not the 5? I will show you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keep going with that line of thought. How many errors could I possibly have in this chain? How many possibilities could I have in this one? This is a better option. How many possibilities could you have in that which is mantuq? It's sarih, it's clear. When there are possibilities, there's greater room for error. The religion steers you away from that. And it says, go with that which is mantuq, because this will clear you of possibilities that could error you. Exactly. Muhtamal, it's possibilities. Even though the narration is authentic and it has 3 narrators, I have another narration that's authentic, same thing, and it has 5 narrators. We'll go with the 3. This is referred to as the isnad that is ali, that has 3. It's higher, as opposed to the narration that has 5. It's nazil, it's descending. Why? Because of the possibilities from the narrators of 4 and 5 add to that which is not with 3. Go with the 3. It's the safer choice. That which is mantuq is sarih, is clear. That which is mafhum is muhtamal. There's possibilities. You can go left, you can go right. Mantuq tells you go straight. You can't error with that like you can error with this.
It seems as though 4 and 5 will also be further away from the narration than 1, 2, and 3.
What do you mean?
In terms of, I'm just thinking, like, if you get a narration, somebody comes in here and says there's a fire on Park Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Another person comes in and says there's smoke on Park Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
which seems like the same thing. Another person comes in and says something else, and then 2 other people come in after them saying something else, but it doesn't necessarily sound like it's related to fire. I'm thinking because of the stretch now and the narrators, the chain, that the possibility of the further it gets away from the original source, the more likelihood that it's going to have of possibly being in error.
And this is why when you stretch it out, this becomes nazil. This becomes the less likely dependent chain to rely upon. Even though it's sound, if I have another chain that's identical to it, but with less narrators, I reduce the possibility of two individuals who could have made an error. Reduce the possibilities. The religion is never guesswork. The religion is clear, it's straightforward, it's proof, it's principles. Whenever things become skeptical or subject, this is something that you say, take it with a grain of salt. Because it's possible you could be doing something in error.
As a child, they played the telephone game. The time the first person told, it went down to 10 people to come back to the first, it was nowhere near.
There was some alteration somewhere along the line. Somebody dropped the ball. So anytime you can reduce the amount of individuals that the information is going through, you're reducing the possibility of shift, alteration, or change. So with that which is mantuq and that which is mafhum, you're always going to take that which is mantuq over that which is mafhum. The narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, water is pure, nothing impurifies it. It's mantuq. The narration of Abu Umama, water is pure, nothing impurifies it except, and they give you some slight details, it's mantuq. From the hadith of Qullataini, if a person says, that's only 20 gallons. We're going with the measurement that we initially presented, 29 gallons equaling approximately Qullataini. But there's only 20. And then there is the likeness of a teardrop of impurity. We're not saying that a tear is impure, but we're just saying the measurement, the amount of a teardrop of urine goes into 20 gallons of water. And the person says, well, based off of kullataini, the water is impure, even without a change. That's what the hadith of kullataini bi mafhumi, with his understanding, that's what it dictates to you, that that water, and this is the position of Imam Ash-Shafi'i and Imam Ahmed. Just by mere mulaqat, just by mere touch, it entered. If the person says, I know it was impure, I know it entered, and I know it was lesser than qullataini, with the methodology of fiqh of Imam Ahmed and Imam Ash-Shafi'i and Abu Hanifa, they would tell you to najis. It has become impure. Imam Malik's position is there has to be tagayyur. There has to be a change. سواء كان قليل أو كثير, regardless if it's a small amount of water or if it's an abundance of water. So this hadith of qullataini, this is the final hadith before you now start to go to, I have water and my wife utilized it for wudu, or she utilized it for a ghusl. Is it still pure? That is the discussion of this water concerning being utilized by another person. Or I have this water and my cat licked out of it. Is that water impure or not? Those are the remaining narrations that come. You have a dog that licks inside of your vessel. Now, is that water impure or not? It's from an external aspect. It's not by sake of the water itself. It's water that's now being mixed with an external aspect. Whether it's a human, you're going to see the narrations that are going to come, the Prophet ﷺ utilizing water with his wife. Whether it's the narration of the cat, whether it's the narration of the dog, whether it's the narration of the fly, you're going to see various narrations in the chapter of water. Why? To show either that these things impurify or they don't impurify the water. with some of the discussions, is going to return back to this particular narration. How much water was it? With that, you're either going to go one of two ways moving forward. It's either that you deem that this narration is authentic and you govern yourself by it. And you hold that the quantity of water now is just as important to me as what encounters the water. That's part of your discussion. Or you say the hadith of Qullataini is a hadith, even if you don't hold it to be authentic, it is something that is still governed by other narrations, the narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, the narration of Abu Umama, or the ijma of the scholars. If there is no change, regardless of amount, it's pure. If there is change, regardless of amount, it takes the same ruling. So now, with this particular amount of water, impurity goes in, and there is a change. Is the water impure? The hadith of Qullataini, impurity enters into the water, and there is a change.
A large amount of water or vessels of water, whatever might enter it, does not impurify, of course, according to Kulatane.
Right. According to the hadith of Qullataini, any impurity that would fall into that water would not impurify it. So if we said, for measurement's sake, it's 29 gallons, right now we have 40. We have 40 gallons. And I'm not saying that that is the amount of Qullataini, I'm saying that is the hypothetical amount. We got 40 gallons, so I'm going to put this around for questioning. We have 40 gallons of water. It's clearly, by our discussion, more than Qullataini. Based off of the hadith of Qullataini, impurity enters into it. Does it impurify the water or not? Based off of this hadith, it does not. And that's by that which is mantuq. That mantuq, in its generality though, is going to be superseded by the ijma. There is ijma amongst the scholars, as we've mentioned, and that is part of the beauty of Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, his sequencing of the narrations. So now you don't have to take this narration and then follow behind it and rule behind it with ijma. It has already preceded. This narration is just giving you an understanding of amount of water where they start to make that differentiation, but you already have some tools and some awareness concerning water and its impurity and its purity. This hadith of Qullataini, even if you say it's authentic, the consensus amongst the scholars will rule over that narration and say no. If there is change, regardless of amount, it is impure. So now, with the hadith of Qullataini, anything lesser than Qullataini, impurity has entered inside of it. There's no change. By the hadith of Qullataini, is the water impure or not? According to the narration, it's impure. The conclusion of this class, as presented from Sheikh Fawzan, Sheikh Uthaymeen, and we'll follow up with the next class with more emphasis concerning it, that generality is from the mafhum standpoint. There is a mantuq standpoint from a narration. Mantuq means there has to be a narration now. There has to be a text. Something has to have told us now. We're not talking about ijma. Something has to have told us. We have the narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, and we have the narration of Abu Umama as well. Despite the narration being weak, it is supported by the ijma. But we also have the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, the mantuq, that water is pure, it does not become impure by anything. So despite its quantity and it being lesser than qullataini, that understanding, the mafhum, is overruled by the mantuq of the previous nations, the previous narrations that restrict that generality. Because remember, we hold the narrations as general and keep them general until something comes to restrict it. This generality is going to be restricted, even though it's mantuk. This generality, even though it's mafhum, is going to still be restricted. So this hadith, if you would say, this hadith has a lot going on in terms of its authenticity. Is it authentic or not? From the chain or from the text? There's a heavy discussion. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, says, majority of scholars of hadith say it's a Hasan hadith. They say that it's a sound hadith. It is a proof and the evidence. Now we drop to, okay, so what's the understanding of it? Water that reaches this amount or greater, regardless if it changes or not, by narration is pure. Anything that does not reach this level, whether it changes or not, it's impure. One understanding of the narration is coming from that which is mantuq. Another understanding is coming from that which is mafhum. But this mantuq and this mafhum are both general. They're going to be specified and restricted by outside external proof and evidences. There was a lot going on with this narration and trying to prepare for its presentation. It takes a lot. Either you're going to walk away with the understanding the hadith is authentic, you're going to work with this mantuq, you're going to work with this mafhum. If you are a person that does not work with the authenticity of the narration, or you say, even if I can't determine its authenticity, despite that, I'm able to get the same outcome by restricting its generality and restricting its generality, whether it's mantuq or mafhum, from other texts, it still gives me the same outcome. Even if you're a person that says, I don't know if it's authentic or not. I don't know whether to give it a red flag or a green flag. I'm on the fence. There is a means of moving forward and guiding yourself with the previous narrations that exit you from being on the fence in clarity. And that would be what? If you didn't know whether this hadith is authentic, whether to work with it, if it was here and it was general, you move with the ijma'. If it was the mafhum, the generality here, you would move with the mantuq of the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. That's all with saying, I don't even know if that hadith is authentic, but even if you put it on the table in the discussion, either way you go, I have a text that addresses that issue. So whether you are a person that authenticates the narration, there is an understanding that you proceed with. If you are an individual that holds that it's not authentic, and this is the position of Shaykh Uthaymeen. Shaykh Fawzan holds that the narration is authentic. Shaykh Uthaymeen says the hadith is da'if. And he mentions that Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned over approximately 16 avenues that show that the narration is da'if. But as we've mentioned, this is an issue of great difference amongst the scholars. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, if I'm not mistaken, he holds the narration, he himself, to be authentic. However, yet his student, Ibn Qayyim, says it is da'if. So, if you hold it authentic, there is a way for you to manage it. If you hold it that it's not authentic, You have other principles that you're going to utilize to manage it. If you're on the middle of the fence and you say, I really don't know which way to go, if you still utilize the previous narrations, it will give you an exit and an outcome without deciding on the authenticity of the hadith. And this is best for individuals that find themselves in that situation to say, I'm not sure where to go, because based off of where you go, it will tell you where to go. You let the evidence take you where you're supposed to go, and then you stop. If you hold that the hadith is authentic, it's going to dictate to you how to manage yourself concerning water, concerning the amount and measurement. If you don't hold it to be authentic, there's no way you're going to entertain it concerning measurements, because it's not a ruling and guiding point concerning water for you. If you're not sure whether you can close the door or whether you should utilize it, the previous 3 narrations or 4 narrations, depending on how you count them, will give you sufficient amount of understanding, inshallah, to guide and manage yourself. Whether it's an abundance of water concerning the hadith of Qullataini, or it's a minute amount of water coming from the hadith of Qullataini. طيب.
I have two questions.
طيب.
One, this box over here that you have general and general.
Okay.
I must have missed something because I'm not sure if these
Mm-hmm.
spoken or understanding, could it? My question is, could it fit in either one of those boxes? Either one of these, spoken or understanding. In other words, can they fit in the general and then the general underneath it? Because that's the way I wrote it. So I want to make sure that I have it on board. Can either one of those fit in there, or does one fit in there and one goes underneath? Because I wrote it, there's one in there and the other one understanding.
Okay. So this hadith of Qullataini, it has a spoken element to it, and then there's a understanding that is taken from it. In both forms, whether it's spoken or an understanding that is derived from it, they're both general. The understanding that's taken from the spoken is general. The understanding that is taken from that which is derived or from an understanding point is general. So I'm going to, with both elements, rule upon them with an external text or standpoint that's going to be specific. That's not going to, it's going to minimize and it's going to restrict the usage of it. And we would say here, yeah, water is pure if it reaches Qullataini, based off of there's no taghyir, there's no change. We would say yes, we would agree with that in general, unless there's a change. Now, if there's a change, I specifically will rule upon that water with being impure, because now there's a specific text to restrict that generality. Yeah, leave it general. If it's hadith al-Qullataini, إن الماء إذا بلغ القلتين لم يحمل الخبث. Exactly. And this is the case. We leave it general. But when something comes that's specific, you have to rule with it. And what the specific aspect is going to do now is going to restrict and is going to minimize. It's going to restrict and minimize something from its generality is going to be taken away now. And whatever is left after that generality, it stays as general. But it's going to be addressed and viewed now in a specific light. إن الماء إذا بلغ القلتين لم يحمل الخبث. That water, if it reaches قلتين, this specific amount, it doesn't carry any impurities. You're going to say, yeah, that's general. But if it changes now, it becomes najis. That's specific. So we can utilize the hadith of Qulatayni, umuman, in general, even if you say, I don't know if it's authentic or not. You say, "Akhi, it doesn't matter if it's Qulatayni, if it's 40, if it's 50. If there's no change, it's pure. If there is a change, I'm going to go with the hadith of Abu Umama. That's now telling me that water has become impure. And even though that hadith is weak, there is consensus amongst the scholars concerning its meaning. Hands down, anytime there is change, that water is impure.
So this is where the statement
Ainam. Ainam. That's just in general concerning the hadith of Qullataini. You can use that qaida to support that in the sense that if it's telling you that water is impure if it reaches the amount of Qullataini or even greater than that. Leave it as such. Al-aslu baqa'u makana ala makana. The foundation is that leave water is as it is until something changes it. Now there's a taghyir. There's a change in taste, color, or smell by impurity, by something that's najis, that occurs inside of the water. Now we say there is consensus amongst the scholars, specifically this situation now has changed. What you were talking about before was in general. Now we restrict it from an outside text or governing body to now change that ruling. To say, no, that water is not pure anymore. The opposite end of it, that which was general, from a standpoint of that which was just mafhum. It's an understanding that's derived. It was in general. If the water, the understanding that you get from that is that if the water is lesser than this amount, if impurity encounters it, it can't defend itself. It can't neutralize the impurity, which means what? It's been overcome. It's impure. That's just understood from the narration. It doesn't tell you that. But we say, wait a minute, that understanding now is not as strong as something that's spoken. The narration of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri is spoken. That water is pure, it doesn't become impure. It rules over that generality. So we say that no, that's not the case. Because remember, this was the case by the hadith of Qullataini, even if there was no change. They said impure. We say, okay, why? It's lesser than Qullataini. By narration, it just gives you the understanding. If it didn't reach this mark, if we give you the statement, and I tell you, as students in the class, you're going to have a test next week. You have to reach 70 in order to be successful, to move on to the next class. If you don't reach 70, what's the understanding that you're going to get? You're not moving on to the next class. But it's understood. I didn't say you wasn't moving on. I said if you get this, you're moving on. I didn't say anything about nobody's not moving on. You got that from the understanding of what I said, the opposite takes place. If we don't do this, then this is going to happen. But you got that from an understanding. I never said that. But it's the mafhum of that which is mukhalafa. That is what is taking place in this narration. I'm going to give you an example of that which is mafhum muwafaqa, mafhum al-muwafaqa. The understanding of that which is in agreement with something, or that may even go beyond that. It's coming from mafhum. No, this is mafhum, but it is the mafhum of that which is al-mukhalafa. It was the understanding of something, but the specific avenue of its understanding, it was the opposite. It opposed it. It didn't agree. It went the opposite direction. I'm gonna give you an example and show you how the affair of that which comes from mantuq, you can also use the understanding and an agreement, a complying form as well. So now, This is from the avenue of complying, mafhum al-muwafaqa, or that which is even more so in agreement with it. In the Quran, in Surah Al-Isra, Allah mentions concerning the affair of being dutiful and honoring, respecting your parents in a prohibition of a command that He directs to all the believers, all the Muslims concerning the parents. He says, فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. And do not say to your parents, uff. This would be the likeness or similar to a parent telling the child, for an example, take out the garbage. And the child, that mere expression right there. Uff. فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ. It's a sign of displeasure, discontentment, disagreement, not being aligned with the parents' wanting and wishes. The scholars, they say, based off of that verse, فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ, for you to beat your parents, to fight your parents. This command was coming from that which is mantuq. فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ. That's mantuq. The mafhum, the understanding that you get from it, that runs in alignment with that or even greater. If you can't say to your parents, you definitely cannot put your hands on your parents. Where'd you get that from? Where's the hadith? Where's the text? It tells you in that verse, if you can't even say, at minimum, there's no way by the understanding of that verse, anything that aligns with that or even greater is prohibited on a greater level. So if there's a prohibition on, and there's disobedience in that, imagine the disobedience in putting your hands on your parents. You say, well, where did you get that from? It's from the mafhum al-muwafaqa, the understanding that is derived from the verse that which agrees with it. And this takes place all throughout the nusus of the Quran and the hadith of the Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam. And they say, whenever you find that there is a mantuq, surface value from the hadith or a verse, anything that is mafhum, that is taken from it, will always rule upon it. But there is a way that even with the mafhum, sometimes it goes mafhum al-mukhalafa or that which is mafhum al-muwafaqa, the understanding of that which is in agreement. But just that alignment of that which is mafhum, it is not as strong as that which is mantuq. But the hadith of qullataini, you can't understand it, regardless of the other narrations before it. You can't understand it if you don't embrace and entertain mantuq and mafhum. Because in general, you don't have to be told to understand that which is mantuq. Everybody would take people's statements surface value. What did you mean by that? Go to the store and buy me a bag of oranges. Bring back apples. It was surface value. It was clear. I asked for oranges. That which is mafhum, a person may derive an understanding from it, whether it's an agreement or that which is the opposite thereof. That is something that concerning water and purity, it ties into the previous narrations. But if you don't embrace and understand mantuq and mafhum, you're not going to understand separation of not just what is the measurement, but what is the ruling that's applying to the measurement. Because other than that, if you don't embrace mafhum, there's no way you can apply any understanding to water that is lesser than qullataini. Because there is no mantuq that tells you, well, anything that is lesser than that, it impurifies itself or it becomes impure. The person says, well, how did you get there? And you say, well, there's no way, there's no door into that discussion except with that which is mafhum. But the beauty of that conversation at this standpoint is it applies to other texts inside of the deen, from hadith and from ayat of the Quran. Whether it is mafhum of agreement, mafhum of disagreement, or opposing, or its opposite thereof. This is the discussion concerning hadith of Qulataining. I hope that it is sufficient. What time is the adhan now, Sheikh, given the time change? After one. We're going to conclude now, inshallah. I don't know if there's any questions or anything that um, is unclear. Comments, questions, suggestions, corrections.
The only other thing that I was wondering about was I heard you use the hadith of, I think, Bayhaqi.
Now, the narration of Abu Umama is riwayah of Al-Bayhaqi. That narration gives you two benefits that are not afforded to you in the narration of Ibn Majah. The first benefit that's afforded to you in that narration is that which is the mutaghayyir, what is changing, and najasa. Impurities are mentioned in the narration of Al-Bayhaqi that's not mentioned in the narration of Ibn Majah. It just mentions in the narration of Ibn Majah, Al-ma'u tuhur illa ma ghalaba ala rihihi wa ta'mihi wa lawnihi. Water is pure except that which changes its taste and color and smell. It doesn't tell you what's changing the taste, color, smell. The narration of Al-Bayhaqi tells you, binajasatin, the impurity is that which changes taste, color, or smell. The other benefit that's afforded to you in the narration of Al-Bayhaqi, that's not in the narration of Ibn Majah, is the process that it has to take place by. Binajasatin tahdutu fi. It occurs and takes place inside of the water itself. That's not mentioned in the riwayah, the narration of Ibn Majah. Despite both of them being weak, the narration of Ibn Majah does not give you what the narration of Al-Bayhaqi does. This is why I had mentioned at that time, if you're just learning this issue and you're trying to guide yourself through this issue, the narration of Al-Bayhaqi, despite it being da'if, should be your yardstick and your measurement for water transitioning from pure to impure. Because it gives you everything that you could possibly have in order to make that determination. The basis of water, al-ma'u tuhurun illa in taghayyara. Water is pure except if it changes. There's a taghayyur. There's a clear change or shift. There's not just an encounter or a meeting. We're not concerned with that. The narration mentions taghayyur. Illa in taghayyar rihuhu. If it's rihuhu, or rihuhu, except if its scent or smell changes. Oh, this is another benefit I didn't mention. The affair of it only having to be one of the qualities. The narration of Ibn Majah has the wow, meaning and, that all three, majmur, in conjunction, have to change. By the narration of Ibn Majah, by the narration of Al-Bayhaqi, only one has to change. It's sufficient. One of the three. إلا أن تغير ريحه أو طعمه أو لونه. Smell, taste, or color. Binajasatin, and it tells you what changes the water's taste, color, or smell. An impurity, not something that's pure, that could change the color or the taste or the smell of the water. And its occurrence, the process. تحدث فيه. So we would say there's three main points that you will find in the riwayah of Al-Bayhaqi that you will not find in the riwayah of Ibn Majah. This narration, he mentions in its conclusion that it's collected by Al-Arba'ah. Who are the four? طيب. He also mentions three other collectors of hadith that have collected this narration as well, that have found it to be sahih. Considering there is great discussion, as we mentioned initially, there's great discussion amongst the people of knowledge concerning its authenticity. However, Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, he's one from amongst those that consider the hadith to be authentic as well. He mentions after the three collectors of hadith. Yes. No. After, yeah. Right. After the initial presenting of the takhrij, the takhrijat, the sources and origins of where these narrations are found, he mentions al-arba'ah, and then he also mentions three other collectors of hadith. Like with the first narration, he mentioned al-arba'ah, wa ibn Abi Shayba, wa lahdu lahu. He mentioned other collectors of hadith concerning that particular narration of Abu Hurairah, aside from the four. And here he does the same. Do you see who they are? You see it? No? It's right there. At the conclusion. I want to give you something as a point of benefit.
Okay, you got the second is Malik, Ahmed,
La.
Lat.
They're doing donuts.
Ibn Mas'ud,
La.
Jabir, Mujahid. What?
La. There's a very important point of benefit.
Okay. Abu Kumeza.
Huh?
Abu Kumeza.
Khuzaimah.
Kuzaima.
Ibn Khuzaimah.
Ibn Kuzaima. And Tirmidhi authenticated it.
Hmm?
This is for the fourth hadith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kumeza, Ibn Hibban, and Al-Hakim.
Very nice, sir.
Oh, I thought you had
This is from the full takhrij, the full origin and sources of the narration. Found it? طيب. طيب. And again, a lot of these collectors of hadith, if not all of them, they are presented in the translated work at the beginning to let you know, like a brief biography of each of these scholars and imams of hadith. Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, and Al-Hakim.
It's in the narration itself.
Yeah.
That reported gives it three people after it who classified as sahih.
There's an important. I'm gonna say before the next class. There's a. It's not here from what I can find at the moment. I want to give you the wording from the sheikh. There's an important notice, a subtle, important point of benefit from um, the avenue of virtue that references these last scholars that are mentioned, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, and Al-Hakim. There's a point of benefit and virtue that is mentioned concerning these individuals that is a highlight, and it plays into the theme of the people of knowledge, giving the virtue to those that deserve the virtue. It may look at it may be looked at as something simple or minute in the eye of many, but it is something that catches the attention of the people of knowledge that even with this presentation of Ibn Hajar, they catch this point and they say that this is something that should have been done in a different manner, just off of the base of virtue and merit. So that's something I want to bring to you concerning those last three. That's why I wanted you to catch those last three. But there's something of benefit that the average eye, for the most part, the trained eye will see it. The average eye won't see it. But it's the point that references and it reverts back to virtues and merits. Just to show you, even at that junction, that this virtue and merit is something that the people of knowledge they point out that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he should have done something slightly different, as opposed to the way that he did do it and he did present it here. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Oh, Sheikh Adam's still here.